My House of Horrors Chapter 541 to 550. After a whole minute, Dr. Pei finally spoke. He looked at Zhang Xiaohu in bed, and his expression was weird. I feel like the whole family is sick. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, I mean it literally. Dr. Pei stood up and walked around the bed. 3 years ago, Zhang Xiaohu's mother brought him and his sister to see the doctor. I can still remember the scene that day. His mother's name was Zhang Chuyu. She was very pretty, and there was a heavy perfume on her. She was dressed from head to toe, but I could sense that she was not happy. There was something hidden in her heart, and she was in a trance. When we were talking, her mind would wander off. After a simple conversation, I got a general understanding of her family. The sister, Zhang Bai, suffered from paranoia. She felt like someone was out to kill her, and everyone looked like a crazed murderer. The younger brother, Zhang Xiaohu, had a strange illness. He would often do strange and dangerous things like turning on the stove alone, splashing water at the electrical outlet, playing with fire at home, and so on. Zhang Chuyu scolded Zhang Xiaohu more than once, but the boy did not listen to her. If anything, it only worsened his behavior. When her husband, Zhang Long, found out about this, he beat Zhang Xiaohu several times, but the violence did not change Zhang Xiaohu. If anything, it made his personality even weirder. Impulsive, violent, often fighting with other students at school, causing destruction. Sometimes, it felt like he was possessed, and he would try his best to hurt the people around him. This was the first time I had encountered a patient like that. Considering Zhang Xiaohu's young age, I did not prescribe any medicine for him at the time but encouraged his parents to communicate with him. I was doing it for the child's future, but Zhang Chuyu did not agree. She was very impatient, and she felt like the child should take medicine when he was sick. There was a difference in treatment. As a doctor in the field of mental illness, we are often misunderstood by others, so I did not mind this small thing. A sudden change in a child's personality must have something to do with his surroundings. From how I saw it, Zhang Xiaohu's illness was mostly due to his parents. To better treat Zhang Xiaohu, I had his mother and sister leave first and asked Zhang Xiaohu to stay behind to communicate with him. After this communication, I discovered something so strange that it was terrifying. Dr. Pei did not shy away from Zhang Xiaohu, who was lying on the bed. He continued to say, when we were interrogating Zhang Xiaohu, the boy accidentally revealed a piece of information. His mother was lying. Lie. Chen Ge was confused. The mother lies to send the child to the mental hospital. I think Zhang Xiaohu is the one who is lying. Quote. Dr. Pei shook his head lightly. I couldn't be sure, but after Zhang Long got into a car accident and died, I realized that Zhang Xiaohu might not be lying. What did he tell you? Zhang Xiaohu secretly told me that he did not do those dangerous things. His mother held his hand and forced him to do those things. She wanted to create the illusion that he had lost his mind. A mother forces her child to do those dangerous things. Chen Ge was getting more and more confused. Then what is her purpose in doing so? The purpose is to kill Zhang Xiaohu's father, Zhang Long. Dr. Pei looked at Zhang Xiaohu with a complicated gaze. The boy told me that the real crazy person is his mother, Zhang Chuyu. His mother knew that her husband had a mistress outside, so she planned to kill Zhang Long in an accident to get the insurance money and then take over Zhang Long's company for herself. It's hard to imagine something like that coming from a child's mouth. Things can't be that simple, right? Yes, I think the same. Dr. Pei leaned against the side of the bed, and his eyes were dark. I don't think a child can understand so many things. There is a high chance that someone taught him these things. In this family of 4, the father is always away from home, and the mother would not frame herself, so the most likely person who taught Zhang Xiaohu these things is his sister, Zhang Bai. Chen Ge did not interrupt and allowed Dr. Pei to finish in one go. After that, I called Zhang Bai in alone, and the result of the interrogation shocked me greatly. Zhang Bai told me that the real crazy person is her father, Zhang Long. When Zhang Long started to manage the Mingyang residence project, she already felt that her father was not normal. He would not come home at night, and he would do things that normal people wouldn't understand. The way he looked at his family became strange. One time, After Zhang Long was drunk, he got into an argument with his mother, Zhang Chuyu. Zhang Long, who was usually gentle, attacked Zhang Chuyu. In the end, he ran into the kitchen to grab a cleaver. He waved the cleaver in the air and pointed at a spot where there was no one around. It was like he had changed into a different person. After that, Zhang Long rarely came home. He was very secretive and even bought a house in eastern Zhejiang's Liwan city. He lived alone outside. If that was all, Zhang Bai wouldn't think that his biological father was a lunatic. But what happened later made Zhang Bai completely afraid of his father. 1 month before they came to my place for treatment, Zhang Chuyu was knocked into by Zhang Xiaohu when she was pouring water, and both of them were scalded. Zhang Bai sent Zhang Chuyu and Zhang Xiaohu to the hospital. She called her father, but there was no answer. Then, she went to Zhang Long's house in eastern Zhejiang to look for him. When Zhang Long heard that both Zhang Chuyu and Zhang Xiaohu were scalded, he cursed at them, saying that he was too busy to visit them. Zhang Bai was very angry when she heard that. She stayed at Zhang Long's house and insisted that her father go to the hospital. That night, Zhang Long received a phone call and left in a hurry, leaving Zhang Bai alone at home. After midnight, Zhang Bai suddenly heard movement inside the house. She thought it was a mouse, so she followed the sound for a long time. Finally, she found a hidden room behind the cupboard. Entering it, she saw a steel cage, and inside the cage was a giant doll. There seemed to be a person inside the doll. The person couldn't speak, and his body was weak. When he heard the door to the hidden room open, he instinctively started to feel fear and shrank into the deepest part of the cage. Zhang Bai didn't dare go over. She was scared out of her wits. She closed the cupboard door and ran back to the hospital. She told Zhang Chuyu and Zhang Xiaohu about this. Zhang Xiaohu was young and didn't know anything, but Zhang Chuyu's reaction was very strange. When she heard that there was a giant doll inside the cupboard, she laughed happily. Based on Zhang Bai's description, both Zhang Long and his wife had mental problems, but there was a contradiction. Zhang Chuyu said that Zhang Bai suffered from paranoia, and everything was Zhang Bai's imagination. Dr. Pei finally finished the story. In any case, that was the situation. The mother said that the brother and sister were mentally ill, the brother said that the mother was crazy, and the sister said that the mother and father had mental problems. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but until now, I still can't tell who was lying. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. After hearing what Dr. Pei had to say, Chen Ge fell into deep thought. Zhang Long's family had a messy relationship. Everyone thought the other was crazy, but after a closer look, Chen Ge realized that no one in the family was crazy. It was just that they had a different perspective, and that was why something so ridiculous had happened. Chen Ge had played Fan Kong's game before, so he knew a lot about the inside story. Of the 4 members of Zhang Long's family, the younger brother, Zhang Xiaohu, should be the most innocent. He was just a child who had not formed his worldview, so there was probably someone guiding him from behind the scenes. It could have been Zhang Chuyu or Zhang Bai who lured him into making the mistake. The older sister, Zhang Bai, should not have been delusional. The giant doll that she saw at her father's new home in eastern Zhejiang was probably Xiao Bu's mother. She was not lying, but her mother, Zhang Chuyu, said that she was crazy and that she was delusional. As a mother, Zhang Chuyu's behavior was very abnormal. She personally sent the 2 children to the mental hospital and insisted that the 2 children were suffering from mental illness. That was very abnormal. Chen Ge thought about it, and he believed that Zhang Chuyu had done that because she wanted to hide something. When Zhang Bai told Zhang Chuyu about the giant doll, Zhang Chuyu smiled happily. That was not a normal reaction. Perhaps she had been suspicious of her husband, but after hearing this news, she understood that her husband had not betrayed her. He was just following the plan. What kind of matter would require imprisoning an adult? And shoving him inside a doll? This should be the source of all the tragedies. Zhang Long had died in an accident, Zhang Chuyu and Zhang Bai had both disappeared, and of all the victims and perpetrators, only Zhang Xiaohu was still alive. He was the only one who knew. Chen Ge sat on the chair and looked at the clean bedsheet. Mingyang residence started 8 years ago, and Buyi disappeared 3 years ago. That is a contradiction. Assuming she is the door pusher, the door that she pushed open should have appeared 3 years ago, but the strange things in eastern Zhejiang started much earlier. In other words, there might be other things in eastern Zhejiang other than this door that has gone out of control. Quote. When Chen Ge was young, his parents had told him that he could go anywhere in Zhejiang except eastern Zhejiang. The door to Liwan City was originally under the control of Dr. Gao from the Society of Strange Tales, but for some unknown reason, it went out of control. Could this be the doing of those dirty things in eastern Zhejiang? Chen Ge knew Dr. Gao very well. To be able to make a psychologist who had multiple red specters and could predict everything retreat, the monster in eastern Zhejiang had to be very powerful. He has left me with a big problem. The door in eastern Zhejiang had gone out of control, and if it was left alone, no one knew what would happen. Before Dr. Gao committed suicide, he showed me a picture. The picture was taken in Liwan City. In it, my parents were standing next to a girl in a red dress. The girl was probably Xiao Biyu. In the picture, my parents did not make things difficult for the girl, so they shouldn't be enemies. Chen Ge's mind started to move. He was not a stubborn person. Be it Meng Nan or the ghost from Coffin Village, all the door pushers view the door as their own, and Bu Yi should be no exception. Now that the door in Liwan City has gone out of control, and the haunted house behind the door is running around, I believe that is not something that Bu Yi would want to see. Quote. The scene behind the door was formed from the door pusher's own memory, and it showed the door pusher's real heart. It was a nightmare that would not disappear. No one is willing to show their bloody and wounded inner world to others, so the door pusher would not want the door to go out of control. Chen Ge believed that the reason the door in Liwan City had gone out of control was due to the interference of the other ghosts in eastern Zhejiang. After understanding that, an idea appeared in Chen Ge's mind. Perhaps I can work with Xiao Biyu to destroy the ghosts in eastern Zhejiang and close the door in Liwan City. A normal person would not think of working with a red specter, and even if they did, they would not know how to do it. However, Chen Ge was different. He had plenty of experience dealing with red specters of all ages, and he felt like he could convince Xiao Biyu. The death of Xiao Biyu and her mother is not that simple. After I get to the bottom of everything, I will help her complete her wish. The more Chen Ge thought about it, the more he felt like this was possible. The hardest part of this plan is not to convince Xiao Biyu but to find Xiao Biyu. Chen Ge narrowed his eyes. He looked quite scary, and the doctors and workers in the room did not dare say anything. Other people might not know where Xiao Biyu is, but I'm different. I've played that strange game Fan Kong. As I continue to clear it, I'll definitely find clues about Xiao Biyu. He raised his head silently. Actually, when Chen Ge started playing the game, a thought had appeared in his mind. The real Xiao Biyu might be hiding inside the game. What he and Fan Chong were controlling was not just a simple game character, but a despairing young soul that was endlessly repeating death. Meng Nan also said that the easiest way to close a door is to find the door pusher. Chen Ge had a rough plan. He planned to join forces with Xiao Biyu and all the red specters to conquer eastern Zhejiang. There's a red specter at White Dragon Cave Tunnel, a red specter at Route 104, and a red specter at Coffin Village. Perhaps I can borrow the power of these three. Chen Ge had interacted with the red specter at White Dragon Cave Tunnel before. He had almost carried the woman home. His words had even touched the woman's heart. The red specter at Coffin Village had a good relationship with Fan Yu. Chen Ge had planned to find the time to bring Fan Yu into the mountain to find the woman. Now that Zhangya had woken up, and he had Shu Yin and Bai Cholan with him, it was hard to say who would be afraid of who at Coffin Village. The woman in the well and the tunnel are easy to deal with, but the key is the woman in the red raincoat. I'm not that familiar with her. I promised her that I would help her find her child within a week, but it's been 3 days already, and I don't even know what her child looks like. Chen Ge really wanted to help the woman in the red raincoat, but he really could not find a place to start. Thankfully, I have no enemies in Zhejiang, or else I would have used the name of the person I wanted to take revenge on. Chen Ge decided to try his luck at the bus stop after dark. That's all I can do for now. After deciding everything, Chen Ge turned his gaze back to Zhang Xiaohu. Strangely enough, Zhang Xiaohu, who did not have much of a reaction when other people looked at him, had an unnatural expression on his face when Chen Ge stared at him. His body leaned backward, and the ropes that bound his limbs were pulled taut. How come it feels like the child is afraid of me? Chen Ge took a few steps forward and sat down on the bed. I know you can understand me, and I know you carry many things in your heart. Why don't we have a chat? Perhaps I can help you. Zhang Xiaohu obviously did not want to get too close to Chen Ge, but his limbs were tied up, so he could only watch as Chen Ge sat down next to him. You look so nervous. Is it because there are too many people in this room? Chen Ge looked at Zhang Xiaohu with concern. Relax, we're all here to help you. Then he turned to Dr. Pei. Do you mind giving me some alone time with him? The boy doesn't seem to be used to being surrounded by so many people. Quote. Dr. Pei looked troubled. Honestly, he did not think that Zhang Xiaohu's reaction was due to the crowd. I don't think that's a good idea. Zhang Xiaohu has a criminal record. If you stay here alone, I'm worried. It's fine, you don't have to worry about my safety. Chen Ge put down the backpack, and it was hard to tell what was inside the heavy backpack. The boy just lacks a chance to communicate. Perhaps there is a soft side hidden inside his heart that no one knows about. The workers and nurses turned to look at Dr. Pei. When they cooperated with the police to investigate Zhang Xiaohu, the police had not made such a request. Dr. Pei wanted to reject him, but considering that Chen Ge was recommended by Li Zheng, and the case that they were responsible for involved several lives, Dr. Pei decided to reject him. After giving it some thought, Dr. Pei nodded. We'll wait outside the door. If the boy suddenly acts up and tries to attack you, you only need to scream for help, and we'll rush in. Okay, thank you. The workers left the room one after another. Seeing them leave, Zhang Xiaohu became even more afraid. A strange sound came from his throat like an injured beast in danger. The door closed. After making sure that the doctors could not see what was happening inside the room, Chen Ge took out the recorder from his backpack and pressed the button. The sound of static echoed in the room. The sound seemed to drill into one's brain and stimulate every nerve. Do you feel better after playing some soothing music? Chen Ge kept his eyes on Zhang Xiaohu, observing his every move. 10 seconds later, he suddenly said, You've seen ghosts before, haven't you? His pupils shook, and Zhang Xiaohu's eyes widened. He wanted to stay away from Chen Ge even more. Such a big reaction, could it be that I guessed correctly? Let me think, did you see her corpse with your own eyes, and she came back to life a few days later? Appear in other places. Quote. Regardless of whether Zhang Xiaohu was mentally ill or not, based on Chen Ge's question alone, if Dr. Pei were there, he would definitely think that Chen Ge was not normal either. The rope that was tied to the leg of the bed was pulled taut, and Zhang Xiaohu's reaction became even more intense. It doesn't matter if you're really crazy or pretending to be crazy. I hope you understand one thing. You're the only one who survived out of your family of 4. It's not because you're lucky, but because she deliberately let you go. When Chen Ge was playing the game, he had a question in his mind. How did Xiao Biyu know that there was a secret room in his classmate's house? At first, Chen Ge thought it was a message left by her mother. However, her mother didn't do anything glorious, so she probably wouldn't tell this to her young daughter. There was a detail in the game where Xiao Biyu found the key inside her mother's pajamas, but thinking about it, how could a prisoner find the key to the exit in her mother's pocket? After seeing Zhang Xiaohu, Chen Ge had a speculation. Could it be that the boy had stolen the key and handed it to Xiao Bu's mother? Zhang Xiaohu probably told Xiao Biyu to enter the secret room. After all, they were classmates. I will not side with either side, I just want to know the truth. The static in the recorder grew louder, and the lights in the room flickered. The room seemed to darken. A blood-red shadow appeared next to Chen Ge. Zhang Xiaohu was really spooked. He could not control himself anymore, and he screamed at the top of his lungs. You can feel his presence. Are you remembering something? Chen Ge did not summon Xu Yin to scare Zhang Xiaohu. He just wanted Xu Yin to inspect Zhang Xiaohu's body to see if there was anything hidden inside his body. Zhang Xiaohu's expression was filled with fear. He pointed at Chen Ge and screamed like he was dreaming. Is it because he has not communicated with others for so long that he has lost the ability to speak? Or did Shu Yin scare the boy? Quote. Turning off the recorder, Shu Yin did not see any ghost on the boy, he was just a normal boy. The sound of electricity disappeared from the room. Chen Ge held Zhang Xiaohu's hands that were gripping the rope tightly. I'm helping you, and I'm helping her. I know there's a shadow in your heart that you can't get rid of. Tell me, just treat me as a passerby who will never appear again. I promise I will not tell a third person about our conversation. Quote. Several minutes later, Zhang Xiaohu slowly calmed down. His forehead was covered in cold sweat, and his chest rose and fell as he gasped for air. Chen Ge had summoned a red specter earlier. Even an adult would not have been able to handle it, much less Zhang Xiaohu. If you don't tell me, I might come to visit you every day until you tell me the truth. Chen Ge placed the recorder on the bedside table and said seriously. Zhang Xiaohu finally could not take the pressure anymore, and he asked, what do you want to know? Let's start with your father. Why would he imprison living people? Why does the Mingyang residence that he is responsible for have so many problems? Quote. I don't know what happened. I only know that Zhang Long once said that the Mingyang residence development project was a scam. Someone forced him to do it. The 4 buildings were not meant for humans, they were meant for ghost cultivators. The voice came and went. It took Chen Ge a long time to understand what Zhang Xiaohu meant. Who would force him to do something like that? A long time ago, Zhang Long said that he felt like something was watching him from behind. He went to see many psychologists, and they all thought it was because he was under too much pressure from work. But then his condition worsened, and he started to blabber nonsense. He said that he saw his own shadow come to life with his own eyes. He even felt like his shadow had a mind of its own and could communicate with him. Quote. Then how did your father's condition get under control? I don't know. One morning, after I woke up, Zhang Long suddenly looked more energetic. It was from that day onward that the feeling he gave me was completely different. He gained many strange habits. Zhang Xiaohu paused and hesitated. It was from that time onward that I stopped calling him father, because I felt like someone else had moved into his body. I suspected that he had been replaced by his own shadow. Replaced by his own shadow. Chen Ge was reminded of the shadow at eastern Zhujiang's freshwater plant. The monster had been setting up everywhere and manipulating people's hearts. It was more troublesome than he thought. Regarding the fact that he imprisons living people, that is his own business. It has nothing to do with my family. Zhang Xiaohu's lips fell open, but in the end, he said, a few years before Zhang Long's accident, he seemed to have been doing something similar. He purposely brought people to Liwan City and then tortured them both physically and mentally, causing them to sink into despair. I have no idea why he would do that. Maybe it's his own special hobby. Quote. Zhang Xiaohu's childhood experience made him mature. After he said that, he sneaked a look at Chen Ge before going silent again. Purposely bringing people to Liwan City to torture them. Chen Ge believed that they were doing this for the door. They wanted to push open a door in Liwan City. But if that was the case, another question appeared. Why did the ghosts insist on pushing open the door in Liwan City? What was the difference between Liwan City and other places? Zhang Long had imprisoned Xiao Bu's mother and placed her inside the doll. Chen Ge had no idea what he had done, but he could guess. However, even after Xiao Bu's mother disappeared, the door was still not pushed open. Instead, it was a coincidence that Xiao Bu pushed open the door after seeing the scene inside the prison. This was probably not part of the plan. Is there anything else you want to ask? Zhang Xiaohu interrupted Chen Ge's thought. If not, can you move this thing away? He pointed at the recorder, and there was fear in his eyes. Since you knew that your father imprisoned a living person, why didn't you call the police? Chen Ge placed the recorder back into his backpack and smoothed out the bedsheet like he had never taken it out. My sister planned to call the police, but my mother's persuasion failed. When I woke up the next day, my sister had already disappeared. My mother said that my sister's condition had worsened, and she needed to go for treatment. Zhang Xiaohu gripped the bedsheet. My mother also told me that if I didn't behave well, I would be sent for treatment. Your mother threatened you. Looks like she was involved in what happened to Xiao Bu. Quote. Zhang Long is dead, and my sister and mother have both disappeared. Is there any point in asking these questions now? Zhang Xiaolong raised his head to look at Chen Ge. After he said that, he seemed to realize something, and his tone softened. When the police came, I said the same thing. I've told you everything I know. You've told me everything you know. Chen Ge stared into Zhang Xiaohu's eyes. He did not even dare look into a normal lingering spirit's eyes, much less a child. When Zhang Xiaohu lowered his head guiltily, Chen Ge asked the last question. I saw a painting in Mingyang Residence Room 104. In the painting, your family of 4 was biting a little girl's limbs. Maybe you and your sister are just passive participants, but in that painting, you are all murderers. At least, that's what the painter thinks. Quote. Painting. I don't know about this. Zhang Xiaohu was slightly taken aback. You just said that Yang district is for ghost cultivators, so the paintings inside are probably drawn by ghosts, right? Chen Ge had a feeling that Xiaolong was still hiding some secrets. Just as he was about to continue asking, the child's eyes suddenly rolled back and his limbs started to cramp. He screamed for help as if he was about to die. Hearing the call for help, Dr. Pei and the caretaker rushed in. They held Xiaolong's limbs and injected him with some medicine. Zhang Xiaolong's eyes slowly became dull. He gradually stopped struggling and lay motionless on the bed. Mr. Chen, the child didn't hurt you, did he? He's fine. I've asked all the questions I needed. Thank you for your hard work. Chen Ge stood up and thanked Dr. Pei. As long as I can help you. If you need any help in the future, just let me know. Dr. Pei was just being polite, but Chen Ge took it seriously. He waved at Dr. Pei, and they left the room together. Mr. Chen, is there anything else you need from me? It's not convenient to talk in here, so I have a few questions to ask you in private. You're afraid that Zhang Xiaohu will hear you. Dr. Pei felt like Chen Ge was being too careful. Based on our diagnosis, the child does suffer from mental illness. Sometimes, mental patients can be smarter than normal people. I know several similar examples. Chen Ge took a few more steps away before he relaxed. Dr. Pei, you said that Zhang Xiaohu's sister went to Zhang Long's home in eastern Zhejiang and found a hidden room inside. Yes, Zhang Bai told me that at the time. Then did you go to eastern Zhejiang's Liwan city to verify her story? Chen Ge was curious about this. If Dr. Pei had told the police about this, then the police would have gone there to investigate, but in his conversation with Li Zheng, the man did not mention anything about the hidden room. I haven't been there, but the police have. Did they find anything? Chen Ge's heart raced because the door was inside the room. Normally speaking, the police would have noticed something strange when they went there. Dr. Pei shook his head. I heard from them that it was a normal house. There was indeed a hidden room behind the armoire, but there was no iron cage or large dolls. There were only a few safes that contained some business documents and cash. Cash. Dr. Pei saw the change in Chen Ge's expression at the mention of cash, and he explained with a bitter smile, the police have taken the pictures. That's Zhang Long's legacy. It's meant for Zhang Xiaohu. Can you tell me the exact location of the house? It's not that I care about the money, I just want to know more about it. The map of the game was similar to Liwan City from 3 years ago, but that was it. It appeared to be a replica of the Liwan City from Xiao Bu's nightmare. That was the Liwan City in Xiao Bu's eyes, it was still different from reality. His father lives in the first residential area on West Street in Liwan City. It's on the first floor of Building 1. The residential area looks old, and when the police first arrived, they did not expect Zhang Long to buy a house there. Hearing the residential area mentioned by Dr. Pei, Chen Ge thought about it. Fan Kong and Fan Dade seemed to live there, so it was not a coincidence that Fan Kong had found the game. Looks like I'll need to go to Fan Kong's home again to return the scooter to him. As if noticing that Chen Ge was planning to go to eastern Zhejiang's Liwan City, Dr. Pei reminded Chen Ge, Mr. Chen, I think you'd better go during the day. It's not safe to go there at night. I have many patients from eastern Zhejiang here, And when I talked to them, I realized that most of them have seen or heard something at night, and that caused their mental state to deteriorate. There's such a thing. Chen Ge realized that the situation in eastern Zhejiang had reached a very serious stage. The dirty things were out of control, and they had infiltrated every corner of the city. Take the patient I met yesterday for example. 1 month ago, he went to the airport to pick up his wife. The plane was at midnight, and the couple drove back to eastern Zhejiang. Based on what he said, after they passed a junction, the buildings on both sides suddenly became unfamiliar, and the streetlights dimmed. They continued to drive forward, and the driver saw a bus slowly approaching from the rearview mirror. It was midnight, so how could there be a bus on the road? Not only did he see the bus, he saw the passengers on the bus waving at him, and he even heard unfamiliar voices calling his name. He was scared out of his wits. He quickly turned the car around and drove back, but it felt like the road was getting longer and longer, like he would never be able to go back. In the end, just as he was about to give up, his phone rang. His grandmother was worried about his safety and asked why he hadn't returned home yet. He told her everything that had happened to him, and strangely enough, when he was on the phone with his grandmother, the car had already left eastern Zhejiang. After he hung up, he realized that his grandmother had passed away last year. At the time, he was busy with an important project, so he didn't go back. Quote. It was his grandmother who passed away that saved his life. When Chen Ge heard about the bus and the changes to the buildings on the side of the road, he confirmed that the patient was not crazy. He was probably telling the truth. Instead of saying it was his grandmother who saved his life, it was the beauty in his subconscious that saved him. From a psychological perspective, because he didn't go to see his grandmother for the last time, he has been feeling guilty, and this guilt helped him maintain his rationality even when his mind was acting strangely. Dr. Pei placed his hands inside the pockets of his white coat. I'm using him as an example because he is lucky. There are still many unfortunate patients locked up at this hospital. I'm telling you all this to tell you that there are many strange things happening in eastern Zhejiang, so you have to be careful when you go there. I know it's not appropriate for me to say this as a doctor, but I hope you can be careful. Quote. Dr. Pei, you have many patients like the driver here. The more Chen Ge listened, the more he felt like he had come to the right place. Can you tell me more about their experiences? If you hear too many of their stories, it'll impact your own ideology. Also, this is the patient's privacy. Even if you're a police officer, I can't reveal it. Dr. Pei rejected Chen Ge's request. It's fine, I still have to thank you. Chen Ge thought this Dr. Pei was a good person, at least among all the psychologists he had met. After leaving the mental hospital, Chen Ge hailed a cab to return to New Century Park. He glanced at the time, and it was only 9 p.m. This is the last bus on Route 104. Should I go out and try my luck? When Chen Ge returned last night, he had charged Fan Kong's electric scooter. He was worried that when Fan Kong came to pick up the scooter, there would be no battery and it would be inconvenient for him to go back. However, Fan Kong might have something to do at the last minute and did not come during the day. Tonight, I'll wait for the bus on Route 104. Whether it's the woman in the red raincoat or the last bus, it doesn't matter. If it's too late to get to eastern Zhejiang, I'll stay at Fan Kong's house to sleep. Chen Ge went through the things that he needed to do in his mind. The deadline that I promised to the woman in the red raincoat is approaching. This is the most important task. When I have time in the future, I'll send Meng Nan back to the third sick hall. Checking his backpack, Chen Ge rode the scooter to the entrance of New Century Park and greeted the guard. The guard was used to Chen Ge going out at night, so he never asked. In fact, they had a good relationship. After Chen Ge's parents disappeared, Chen Ge had stayed at the haunted house every day. At night, only the guard and Chen Ge were left at the park. Sometimes, when the old man ran into a problem that he could not solve, he would ask for Chen Ge's help. When he was in a good mood or a bad mood, the old man would get 2 bottles of wine and bring Chen Ge to the theme park's canteen in the middle of the night. When Chen Ge was in trouble, many people at this park had helped him, so when the park was in trouble, he would stand up without hesitation. Xiao Chen, you're a boss now. This scooter doesn't match your current identity. The old man carried a teapot. Even from afar, Chen Ge could smell the scent of alcohol. It was not water that the old man was pouring. We'll talk about it later. I haven't gotten my license yet, and the people at the driving school have a problem with me. They say I drive too wild. Then why don't you just change your habits? They're doing this for your own good. Safety first. Quote. I'm too lazy to change. I'll hire a driver to drive for me in the future. Chen Ge rode the scooter out of New Century Park. After talking to the guard, he realized a problem. Even if I manage to get the bus back, I'm afraid I can only drive it in the suburbs. It's still too inconvenient to go to the city. But I hear the subway on the 4th line is haunted. If I have time in the future, I should go take a look. Quote. Riding the scooter, Chen Ge rushed to the nearest bus stop. He stood in the cold wind for half an hour, but the bus and the woman in the red raincoat did not show up. Does it have to be a rainy day? Chen Ge did not want to give up. He followed the route of the bus and headed toward eastern Zhejiang. At 11 p.m., Chen Ge entered eastern Zhejiang. He could feel that this place was different from other places. There was not a single car on the road. When I was here last time, there were taxis that occasionally came this way. Is it because of what happened to me that the taxis no longer come to eastern Zhejiang at night? Chen Ge shook his head. He felt like he was not that powerful on his own. Something scary had happened in eastern Zhejiang again. Since we haven't met, it means that the time is not right. That's not my fault. Whenever Chen Ge passed a bus stop, he would stop for a while. Initially, he hoped that the bus would show up, but gradually, he gave up hope and hurried toward Liwan City. The road condition worsened. At 11:30 p.m., Chen Ge suddenly felt a chill on his neck. He opened his palm, and a thin rain fell on his palm. It's raining. Chen Ge took out his phone to look at the weather report. It said that there would be no rain in Zhejiang for the next few days. Rain is a good thing. The yin energy is heavy, and the chance of running into ghosts is high. The woman in the red raincoat might show up as well. Putting the phone away, Chen Ge looked around. Even though he had been to eastern Zhejiang several times, the buildings around him were still unfamiliar. The dim streetlights gave off a weak light, but it was unable to chase away the darkness. The atmosphere became strangely depressing. I'm still on the route of the bus. Should I wait for it here? The changes around him were similar to what Dr. Pei had described at the mental hospital. Chen Ge had a feeling that the bus would show up that night. Xiao Jiyu said that the woman's child is on the bus. I only need to get on the bus to help her snatch the child down and have her confirm it. Chen Ge had his own plan. He only asked the woman in the red raincoat to confirm it, but he did not say that he would return the child to her. His promise with the woman in the red raincoat was to help her find the child. Whether he would return it to her or how he would return it to her was another matter. The pitch-black night sky was like a huge curtain, blocking all the light. Chen Ge sat on the scooter and opened his palm. The cold raindrops fell into his palm. Looks like it's going to rain. The buildings on the side of the road looked blurry. It was not even midnight, but there was no light in the residential area. Do the people in eastern Zhejiang sleep early? Chen Ge noticed this. He parked the scooter at the bus stop and took out his phone to look at the time. It's not midnight yet. Normally, those things only become active after midnight. Chen Ge did not carry a raincoat or umbrella. He was worried that Yan Danian's comic would get wet. Should I wait here? Or should I move on before the rain gets any heavier? Quote. After giving it some thought, Chen Ge decided to move on. When the rain gets heavier, I'll find a place to hide. I can't spend the whole night waiting for the hearse to show up. Going to the old house where Zhang Long imprisoned Xiao Bu's mother should be my priority tonight. Chen Ge was a very decisive person. Once he made a decision, he would act immediately. At this moment, he was the only car on the entire road, but he did not panic at all. Route 104 is the longest bus in Zhejiang and has the most stops. It's also the only bus that goes from western Zhejiang to eastern Zhejiang. When the city opened this route, it was to strengthen the connection between western Zhejiang and eastern Zhejiang. Now that I think about it, of all the routes, only the last bus on Route 104 will have an accident. The culprit probably wants to use this bus to bring the ghosts and lingering spirits from western Zhejiang to eastern Zhejiang, or they want to sneak something from eastern Zhejiang to western Zhejiang. Chen Ge had no idea what the culprit in eastern Zhejiang was planning to do, but from his previous contact with them, the culprit appeared to be planning to turn eastern Zhejiang into a specter's playground. They had even built a residential area outside of Liwan City just for the specters. Eastern Zhejiang is much more dangerous than western Zhejiang. I can't let my guard down. The deeper they went into eastern Zhejiang, the darker the street lights became. The twisted light not only failed to bring warmth and security, but it only added to the anxiety in their hearts. The buildings on the side of the road were very common, but at this time, there was an indescribable strangeness to them. It was as if the people living in them were not living, but something else. When passing AT Junction, Chen Ge stopped. He stood under a stop sign for Route 104 and looked left and right. He tried his best to remember, but he could not remember which way to go. After completing the Black Phone's trial missions so many times, in order to escape in times of danger, he had developed the habit of memorizing the nearby roads no matter where he went. After his previous visits to Liwan City, he had already memorized the route, but when he followed the route in his memory, a route that was not in his memory appeared before his eyes. Did I remember wrongly? Or have I already entered the area of influence of the out-of-control door? Quote. He took out his phone and opened the map navigation, but his phone couldn't locate him. Looks like I've also encountered the situation that Dr. Pei described. It was the same situation, but Chen Ge's method was completely different from the patient's. He parked the e-bike by the roadside, carried his backpack, walked to the nearest shop, and knocked heavily on the closed shutter door. Such a crazy knocking at midnight, and not a single person in the building came out to see what's going on. Chen Ge turned back to look. The buildings in his sight were blurry, and the darkness was like a stampeding beast charging from afar, ready to swallow everything, including Chen Ge. If the out-of-control door is left open for a long time, the strange and despairing world inside the door will overlap with the world outside the door. Chen Ge had only heard about it from Meng Nan, he had not seen it himself, so he could not be sure. Never mind, there's no point thinking about it. Chen Ge pulled open the zipper of his backpack. He was about to take out the hammer to test the reaction of the residents behind the door when something suddenly drove toward him from the darkness. The car looked old, like it hadn't been maintained for a long time. Instead of calling it a bus, it looked more like a coffin that was moving on the road. Route 104. Chen Ge looked at the bus that drove out from the T-junction, and his pupils narrowed. At the same time, the black phone that he kept in his shirt pocket vibrated. Chen Ge took it out of habit and swiped the screen. Congratulations, Spectre's favored. Congratulations for triggering the 2-star trial mission, the hearse. Do you wish to accept the mission? Warning. If you give up on the mission, the scenario will never be unlocked. Quote. Looking at the message on the phone, Chen Ge chose yes without hesitation. The hearse carrying the dead is on its way. If you do not leave in 1 hour, you will be trapped on the bus forever. Mission requirement. Take the bus on Route 104 to Liwan City after midnight and get off safely. Mission hint. After completing this mission, a new trial mission will be unlocked. After 3 seconds, Chen Ge put the black phone away. After reading the mission details, he confirmed his suspicion. Among the first few trial missions given by the black phone, the hearse mission should be the key to connecting western Zhejiang and eastern Zhejiang. After completing this mission, the black phone might update me with a more difficult trial mission that needs to be completed in eastern Zhejiang. Chen Ge carried the backpack and returned to the bus stop. He looked at the bus that was slowly approaching like a coffin, and his eyes narrowed. There should be a greater red specter in eastern Zhejiang. Looks like after completing the hearse mission, the black phone will update me with a 4-star trial mission. Taking a deep breath, Chen Ge was ready. He stood alone in the dark, and his expression was serious. The hearse mission is a new beginning. I can't be careless. The cold wind caressed his sleeves, and his hair was wet. Chen Ge looked at the approaching bus, and one of his hands slowly reached into his backpack. The rain was getting heavier. The gloomy bus finally pulled into the bus stop. Chen Ge's heart started to race, and he heard the announcement coming from the bus. It's finally here. Chen Ge looked at the passengers on the bus who had their heads lowered. He took a few steps forward, but before he could step out of the bus stop, the bus drove past him. It picked up speed and sped away from the bus stop, flying into the distance. Looking at the departing bus, Chen Ge took a long time to react. It's not letting me get on. The mission requirement on the black phone was to take the bus to Liwan City and get off safely, but the bus did not plan to let Chen Ge get on. If he did not take the bus, he would naturally fail the mission. Chen Ge did not expect that to happen. To avoid failing the mission, Chen Ge grabbed his backpack, rode Fan Kong's e-bike, and chased after the bus. There's still someone who hasn't gotten on. Thick clouds piled up in the night sky. It was dark and gloomy, and not a single ray of light shone through. Darkness descended, and shadows flashed among the blurry buildings. Malicious eyes turned to look at the road. In the empty countryside, a man was riding an electric scooter, chasing after the bus ahead of him. I don't believe you won't stop at the next stop. Chen Ge gritted his teeth. This was the first time he had run into the bus on Route 104, but the man's reaction was out of his expectations. Could it be that this bus only allows dead people to board and forbids living people from entering? But that can't be right. Why didn't anyone stop Huang Ling and Xiao Jiyu when they boarded the bus? Quote. The electric scooter had limited battery. After another 4 stops, Chen Ge would have to rely on his own power to drive the bus. He was in a hurry to complete the mission, so he forgot the directions and tossed all the other things to the back of his mind. He chased after the bus like his life depended on it. You won't let me get on the bus. Wait until I catch up to you. It was very difficult to catch up to the bus with an electric scooter, but it was not impossible. Perhaps it was due to the bus's age, or perhaps it was its own problem, but it could not move very fast. Chen Ge chased after it with all his might, but he could not close the distance between him and the bus. He could only hope that the bus would stop at the next stop. The buildings on both sides flew by, and the rain soaked Chen Ge's shirt. After who knew how long, he finally saw the bus stop before him. Someone's waiting for the bus. With yin-yang vision, Chen Ge saw clearly that there was a middle-aged man at the stop. He was wearing winter clothes, a scarf, a hat, and a mask that completely covered his face. The bus entered the stop, and under Chen Ge's gaze, it started to slow down. Before the bus came to a complete stop, the door opened. The driver inside the bus seemed to be waving at the man outside, telling him to get on. The middle-aged man was confused, and after some hesitation, he got on the bus. In this short delay, the distance between Chen Ge and the bus on Route 104 had shortened quite a bit. There's a chance. The purpose of this hearse's existence seems to be to send those special passengers waiting at the platform to a certain place, so as long as there are people waiting at the platform, it will stop. Quote. Before the middle-aged man could figure out what was going on, the last bus on Route 104 had already started to move toward the next stop. The cold rain hit his face. Chen Ge chased after him relentlessly. The buildings on both sides became more and more eerie and blurry, and the rain became heavier. However, none of this dared to stop Chen Ge. Ever since he had obtained the black phone, he had never failed a trial mission. If it was any other mission, it would have been fine, but the Fatal Hearse mission is related to the other trial missions in eastern Zhejiang, so I have to complete this mission. Chen Ge was playing with his life. Riding an electric scooter to chase after a hearse in the middle of the night was something that most people wouldn't even dare to think about. After a few more intersections, Chen Ge soon saw another bus stop. This time, there was a strange person squatting there. His limbs were extremely uncoordinated, and he gave off the feeling that he would fall at any moment. The hearse entered the bus stop, slowed down, and the door opened. The strange person squatting on the ground seemed to have noticed something. He felt that something was wrong, and the atmosphere inside the bus was very strange. He did not get into the bus immediately. Someone on the bus opened the window and gestured at him, but the strange person could not understand. With this hesitation, Chen Ge was overjoyed. He gritted his teeth and continued to charge forward. After a short conversation, the strange person still got into the bus. The driver probably realized that Chen Ge was getting closer to them, so he did not even bother with the radio. He closed the door and sped up. Soon. If there are more passengers waiting for me at the next stop, I should be able to catch up to it. Quote. Chen Ge did not care about the battery and chased at full speed. Several minutes later, the third bus stop appeared. A couple was at the bus stop, and their bodies were stuck together like glue. The hearse entered the bus stop, and the speed slowed down. The door opened, and the driver shouted something. The man prepared to get into the bus, but the woman turned on him. She tried her best to make the man stay, and she even started to cry. The two had a disagreement. A moment ago, they were stuck together, but in the blink of an eye, they were arguing. The man seemed to be saying that he had to leave that day, that the seventh day had passed. His hand grabbed the door, but the woman refused to let him go. She even started to bite the man. Here's my chance. Chen Ge saw this from afar, and he was excited. The battery of the scooter was running low. If he could not catch up to them at this stop, he would really be in trouble. The couple argued at the door, and the driver felt like he was going crazy. His head felt like it was going to explode. He glared at the couple and yelled at them. Seeing that Chen Ge was getting closer, he decided not to wait any longer and closed the door. But this time, the man outside seemed to have made up his mind to get on the bus. He used his body to block the door. The woman tried to pull him out, but the man held onto the railing inside the bus and refused to let go. The driver watched from the side, and he almost could not resist the urge to kick the man in the face. The couple argued at the door, and the driver screamed at the top of his lungs. The expressions of the passengers who had their heads lowered changed. They seemed to have sensed something. The man was stuck at the door, and the driver could not wait any longer. He prepared to force the bus, but at that moment, everyone inside the bus heard the sound of static. The sound did not come from inside the bus. Finally, I've caught up. A low voice echoed from outside the bus. Chen Ge passed the bus from the side and parked his e-bike at the front door of the bus. His palms were sweaty. The battery of the scooter was about to run out, and he almost failed the mission. Standing at the door, Chen Ge did not want to waste time with the driver this time. He reached into his backpack to take out the hammer. The couple who were arguing at the front door saw Chen Ge take out such a big weapon, and they did not dare to make a sound. Don't be afraid. Thanks to the two of you, I managed to get on the bus today. I will treat you well in the future. Chen Ge raised the hammer and looked at the sweaty driver. Do you want to open the door yourself, or do you need me to help you? The driver's Adam's apple vibrated, and he unwillingly opened the front door. This is a public bus. Everyone can take it, so why can't I get on? With the people watching, Chen Ge helped the scooter next to him up and told the man next to him, Brother, give me a hand. The man had no idea what was going on, and he helped Chen Ge move the e-bike onto the bus on Route 104. You two should come with me. Chen Ge told the couple underneath the bus. The man wanted to reject, but Chen Ge grabbed his sleeve. Don't be afraid. With me here, this driver will not dare to bully you. The man's body was pressed against his girlfriend's, but his sleeve was pulled by Chen Ge's hand. He stood at the front door of the bus and said with regret, Why don't you give me some time to think about it? You've helped me a lot. I need to thank you properly today. Before the man finished, Chen Ge had already dragged him and his girlfriend onto the bus. The door closed, and the bus slowly moved forward. Listening to the cold broadcast, the man and his girlfriend felt chills run down their spines. After the three paid the fare, the couple walked to the back of the bus under the driver's venomous gaze. Chen Ge held the e-bike and stood next to the driver. He turned to look at the man but did not say anything. Cold sweat slid down the driver's face. He was wearing an old bus company uniform, and his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Veins popped on the back of his hands. You don't look so well. I'm fine. It's just an old ailment. The driver did not dare to look Chen Ge in the eye, so he kept his eyes on the road. New passengers, please move to the back. Our company has a rule that forbids drivers from talking to passengers while driving. Your company forbids you from talking to passengers. Then does your company have a rule that forbids passengers from boarding at night? He had almost failed the mission. Chen Ge had chased for 3 stops on the e-bike before he managed to catch up. No one would be able to accept something like that. I saw you riding the e-bike, and I thought you were just taking shelter from the rain at the bus stop, so I didn't stop. The driver was cautious, and after a long time, he came up with an excuse. What you said makes sense. Chen Ge silently shoved the hammer back into his backpack. He looked at the driver and nodded meaningfully. What's your name? Tang Jun. The driver felt like he was being stared at, and his legs shook unnaturally. Not bad. The driver had a good attitude toward the passengers, and he was not inflexible. He was very alert. Wasn't this kind of ghost exactly what Chen Ge needed? Not giving the driver a hard time, Chen Ge turned to look at the other passengers on the bus. Other than the couple sitting at the back and Chen Ge himself, there were 8 other passengers in the car. One was the man wrapped in thick clothes. He wore a mask and a hat, revealing only a pair of eyes. Next to this person was a man who had just gotten on the bus at the previous stop. His limbs were extremely uncoordinated, as if he was a mechanical doll that had just been assembled in a toy factory and had not yet been tested. In addition to the 2 passengers that Chen Ge had seen get on the bus, there were also 4 women in hospital gowns. The 4 of them sat by the window with their heads lowered. Their long black hair covered their faces, which made them look a little scary. Chen Ge's gaze swept across them and finally stopped on a middle-aged woman in the 3rd row. The woman was ugly and burly. She was holding the hand of a little boy sitting next to her. The child looked to be about 4 or 5 years old. He leaned on the woman and didn't open his eyes no matter how bumpy the car was. He doesn't look like he's asleep, but he looks like he's unconscious. This was the first time that Chen Ge had taken the last bus on Route 104. The situation inside the bus was different from what Xiao Jiyu had described. He did not see a high schooler or a man who was soaking wet inside the bus. The only person that matched the description was the middle-aged woman. The child next to her is the child in the red raincoat. Chen Ge was not sure because Xiao Gu's description of the child was different from this boy. Could this woman have gone to eastern Zhejiang to kidnap another child? A flash of annoyance crossed his heart. Chen Ge parked the e-bike and walked to the last row of the bus. The couple stayed far away from him, but they did not expect Chen Ge to voluntarily go find them. The 2 moved deeper into the bus awkwardly, and their bodies were stuck together. This is a public place. You 2 better be careful. Chen Ge sat down next to the man like he could not see the other empty seats. Brother, thank you for earlier. The man was confused, but he smiled politely at Chen Ge. As he got closer, Chen Ge saw that there was an obvious burn mark below the man's neck. The scary scar was a huge contrast to his fair skin and handsome face. Xiao Jiyu had run into this couple before, but at that time, they did not get on the bus. What's wrong with the 2 of you? You were fine at the stop, but why did you start arguing when the bus pulled in? Chen Ge asked casually. I want to move to eastern Zhejiang, but she's worried that I won't be able to get used to the place, so we started arguing. The man's voice was hoarse like his throat had been burned. What's so good about eastern Zhejiang? Western Zhejiang is more comfortable. You haven't lived there before, but once you get there, you'll definitely fall in love with it. Chen Ge looked at the passengers in the bus and did not let his guard down. The fatal hearse was a 2-star mission, and its difficulty was similar to Muyang High School. Even though there was no red specter, for Chen Ge, it was still quite dangerous. Western Zhejiang. This option was not part of the man's plan, but he was too embarrassed to argue with Chen Ge, so he replied casually, if there's a chance, I'll go take a look. You won't regret it. Chen Ge revealed a kind smile. Pardon me for asking, but what did you 2 do in the past? Speaking of his previous occupation, the man lowered his head slightly, but it was the woman next to him who spoke. He was my private violin tutor. My father spent a lot of money to hire him from another province. You know how to play the violin. Chen Ge's eyes lit up. This is a talent. The man nudged the woman to stop her from continuing, but the woman seemed to be reminded of something sad. She gripped the man's hand tightly and refused to let go. Her nails dug into the man's flesh, but there was no blood. Compared to playing the violin, he's better at lying and deceiving. What are you talking about? The man's voice turned severe. I've never lied to you. I just wanted you to give me more time. The woman stared into the man's eyes before moving her gaze away. It doesn't matter. After all, we're finally together now, and no one can separate us. Chen Ge listened patiently. He preferred this kind of life with a story. Twists and turns would often breed different emotions, and strong emotions would sometimes infect the visitors. Taking out his phone, Chen Ge searched for the news in Zhejiang over the past few months. He set the keywords as lovers and burns, and he soon found one. After the last investor of Mingyang residence committed suicide, his only daughter and his violin tutor committed suicide at Liwan City Mall. The police suspected that it was someone else from the company who murdered the family. At the time, the incident had caused quite a stir in Zhejiang. After reading the message on the phone, the way Chen Ge looked at the couple changed. Mingyang residence was built for ghosts, and all three investors were dead. There had to be more to it. Chen Ge even suspected that the three investors had been bewitched by the shadow, and that was why they had come to Liwan City to build this place. The death of the three investors should be related to the shadow as well. To achieve their goal, to destroy the evidence, they killed the investors after using them. The mastermind sure is cruel. After finding out the couple's identity, Chen Ge looked at them in a different light. The man insisted on getting on the bus to get to Liwan City, probably because he had received some news, but the woman refused to get on the bus. She probably had her own reasons. The two had different thoughts, but when they committed suicide, their bodies had been burned together, so they had no choice but to stay at the bus stop. If not for Chen Ge, they probably would not have gotten on the bus. This couple is very helpful for me to understand Liwan City and Mingyang residence. Looks like I can't just treat them as employees anymore. After confirming their identity, Chen Ge was even more curious about the other passengers. Tonight is destined to be a night of harvest. Chen Ge liked this feeling of challenging a low-level trial mission. Everyone could just sit together and talk, and the problem could be solved. It was such a good atmosphere. The couple argued softly. Chen Ge grabbed his backpack and left the last row. He sat down next to the man with the uncoordinated limbs. Brother, what's your name? Chen Ge hugged the backpack and turned to look at the man. The man turned his head around stiffly. After a long time, he realized that Chen Ge was talking to him. He raised his hand to gesture. Seeing that Chen Ge still did not understand, he pointed at his mouth and waved his hand. A mute. Chen Ge did not expect there to be such a passenger on the bus. He bowed slightly. I'm sorry. The man waved his hands, and his fingertips accidentally touched the back of Chen Ge's hand. It was still warm. His hand is warm. Is this a living person? Chen Ge narrowed his eyes. Using yin-yang vision, he did not see anything wrong with the man. He should have gotten into the car accidentally, just like Xiao Jiyu and Huang Ling. After thinking for a moment, Chen Ge felt that something was wrong. When the hearse arrived at the station, it was 11:30 p.m. Who would be waiting at the bus stop at this time? Chen Ge stared at the man for a long time, and he gradually realized the problem. The man seemed to be mentally deficient. It was not that he could not make a sound, but he could not speak. A mentally challenged person taking a hearse to Liwan City in the middle of the night, was he really dumb or was he just acting dumb? Taking out his phone, Chen Ge clicked open his communication page. It's very dangerous for you to be out there alone. Where are you going? I'll go with you. This is my phone number. The man didn't seem to understand his words and only knew how to wave his hand. Chen Ge studied the man's attire. The man's clothes had not been washed for a long time, and his pants were riddled with holes. It was hard to connect this man to a murderer or a mastermind. Unable to communicate, Chen Ge gave up after several tries. He planned to follow the man to see what he was planning to do in Liwan City after completing the mission. If there was something wrong with the man, Chen Ge would control him immediately, but if he was just a normal person, Chen Ge would follow him to ensure that he wouldn't be attacked by ghosts. No one knew what was hidden in Liwan City at night. Under the influence of the door, that had gone out of control. Liwan City had become a place where two worlds overlapped. Standing up, Chen Ge walked to the other side of the aisle. The people on the bus watched him walk back and forth, and no one objected. The driver did not dare say a word. He stepped on the gas pedal, and the only thought in his mind was to get to the last stop as soon as possible. Stopping next to the man in thick clothes, Chen Ge studied the man. Don't you feel hot wearing such thick clothes? The man raised his head to look at Chen Ge. Then he pushed down the brim of his hat and said coldly, I'm fine. He was wrapped in thick clothes, and he was wearing a hat, gloves, and mask. Only his eyes were exposed. Are you sick? Chen Ge used his yin-yang vision, but he realized that the man appeared to be a living person as well. How come I feel like a living person is stranger than a ghost? Chen Ge sat next to the man. He could feel the chill radiating from the man, and the chill came from inside his body. Chen Ge had experienced this before. At Coffin Village, the old lady who had been in contact with the well ghost for decades had her body temperature continuously dropping. In the end, it was the well ghost who had helped her to maintain her body temperature. Did this man interact with ghosts often as well? Chen Ge could not see the man's face clearly, and he could not get any useful information from his eyes and voice. When these two got into the car, the driver did not stop them, which means that the driver did not sense any threat from them. From this point, even if they have a trump card, that trump card is not as powerful as Zhang Ya. Quote. With that in mind, Chen Ge sighed in relief. He leaned back against the chair. From time to time, he would glance to the side, and gradually, he discovered something useful from some of the details. The scarf around the man's neck was handmade with wool. The thread was messy, and there was a part where one ball of thread had been used up and needed to be reconnected. Normally, it was like braiding hair. One would split the ends into several parts and then weave them together. Chen Ge had done this when he was making clothes for the mannequins at the haunted house, and there was no trace of it at all. However, the scarf around the man's neck was obviously tied up by a ball of thread. The person who had knitted the scarf should be a newbie. Based on the scarf's style and age, it was at least 10 years old. Other than that, even when the man was on the hearse, he still wore this scarf. This meant that this thing was very important to him, and this normal scarf had a special meaning. Finally, combining with the man's voice, Chen Ge believed that the man was around 40. He should have a wife who loved him dearly, and his wife had probably met with an accident. The man's body was cold. Similar to Chen Ge, he had spent a lot of time with ghosts. Connecting all the clues together, Chen Ge believed that this man had a ghost who had been accompanying him, and that ghost was his wife. Without any concrete evidence, Chen Ge could only speculate. However, compared to the man's identity, he was more curious about why the man would go to Liwan City so late at night. Most of the ghosts in western Zhejiang would fight and consume each other, but the ghosts in eastern Zhejiang seemed to be different. After being stared at by Chen Ge for a long time, the man tightened the collar of his shirt and coughed lightly. Do we know each other? His voice was cold and weathered, like he did not care about anything that happened in the outside world. Chen Ge did not expect the man to speak so suddenly. He paused for a moment before continuing the conversation. You look like a friend of mine. The air is almost the same. Have we met somewhere before? The man turned around, and there was a trace of tiredness in his eyes. You might have the wrong person. Impossible, I must have met you somewhere before. This was the first time that Chen Ge had met the man. He said that because he wanted to chat with the man and gain more useful information. The man was silent. He knew that Chen Ge did not look like he was lying. After some hesitation, he raised his hand to remove the mask from his face. The man had a high nose, pale skin, and purple lips. After removing the mask, he coughed violently. You've got the wrong person. I'm not the person you're looking for. Then he put the mask back on, and there was an incomprehensible emotion in his eyes. I don't have friends. The man was not afraid of Chen Ge. He was a passenger who had boarded the bus later, and he was a living person. He did not know what was hiding in Chen Ge's shadow. Perhaps in his eyes, Chen Ge was no different from the other passengers. Chen Ge wanted to get to the bottom of what had happened in eastern Zhejiang, and he wanted to bring all the ghosts on the bus back to the haunted house, but to his surprise, there were 2 living passengers on the bus that night. He did not want to expose his secret, and it was not convenient for him to do anything out of line before 2 living people. Therefore, he changed his plan and kept a low profile for now. When they reached Liwan City and the 2 living passengers got off the bus, he would have a good chat with the other passengers. Sitting obediently in his seat, Chen Ge moved his eyes away from the man and looked out the window. The rain fell on the glass. The buildings on both sides were already blurry, and the surroundings were dark. The bus on Route 104 that they were on was like a small island floating on a black ocean. The car suddenly became quiet. The man realized that Chen Ge hadn't spoken since he finished talking to him. He thought he had said something wrong. He put his hands on his knees and suddenly asked Chen Ge in a low voice, "Did he want to ride in this car to find your friend?" Chen Ge's eyes gradually focused, and the expression on his face began to change. It was as if the man had seen through the secret in his heart. There was some uneasiness, some pain, and some self-blame. Nodding slowly, Chen Ge looked at the man beside him. "How did you know? The passengers on this bus have their own stories and secrets. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken this bus after midnight. From your tone, it sounds like this isn't your first time taking this bus, right?" The corner of Chen Ge's mouth twitched, revealing the same smile as when he got on the car, but there was a trace of suppressed pain in his eyes, which made people feel sorry for him. "When I go to work, I take Route 104. I've been on it for almost 20 years. The man spoke slowly like he had not talked to anyone for a long time. At the time, the department was busy, and we did not have enough manpower. I often worked overtime, and I always took the last bus home. Initially, I liked taking the last bus because there were few people, and it was very quiet. However, as I took it more and more, looking at the dark buildings on both sides, I felt a little lonely." Quote. Department. What did you do before this? Quote. A doctor from the burn unit. The man emphasized the term burn unit, and there was a ripple in his eyes like he was reminded of something. Burn unit. Chen Ge had only interacted with psychologists before, so he did not know much about the burn unit. Surgery, skin grafting, rehabilitation, that is our job, the man said lightly, but Chen Ge heard the heaviness behind those few words. The man also noticed the extremely suppressed pain in Chen Ge's eyes. He seemed to see his own shadow in Chen Ge, and subconsciously, he treated Chen Ge as someone like him. After a short conversation, the two fell silent again. After a long time, Chen Ge said, "Are you taking this bus to look for someone?" The man nodded lightly, and his gloved hand pressed on the scarf. "Was this scarf knitted for you by your wife?" Chen Ge found the right time and pretended to ask casually. Hearing Chen Ge's question, the man was stunned for a moment. He moved his hand away from the scarf and slowly shook his head. "It's not a gift from your wife." The truth was different from Chen Ge's speculation. He was curious. "Can you tell me your story?" The rain became heavier, and the raindrops slammed against the window, creating a continuous sound. The man was silent for a moment before he removed his mask and took a deep breath. The patients in the burn unit are different from other departments. Their bodies are covered in cuts and bruises, their faces are unrecognizable, their skin is torn, and their flesh is torn. Here, they are everywhere. When I was doing my internship, I thought I had arrived at hell until I slowly got used to the bloody mess, the foul odor, and all kinds of strange smells. At the time, I thought that I would not have too many emotions when I faced patients. That was until I was 30, and I met a 14-year-old patient. She was still a child, and her back was seriously scalded by boiling water. I used half an hour to separate her clothes from her skin. The girl was very quiet. She did not cry or make a fuss. To prevent the child's brain from being affected, I did not use general anesthesia. When I separated her clothes from her skin, the child kept her eyes open and looked at me. Her back and her face were two extremes. I comforted her like how I comforted other patients. After the wounds were dealt with, I found the person who had sent her to the hospital. I planned to give him some instructions, but after some questioning, I realized that it was a neighbor who had sent her to the hospital, and the injuries on her body were not due to an accident. They were the doing of her parents. I called the police. When the man spoke, he would occasionally cough. His physical condition was very poor. The girl's father had serious violent tendencies, and her mother was deaf and mute. She was weak. The police detained and educated her father for a month. In the end, it was her mother who went to the police station to plead for mercy. After all, the whole family depended on her father to support them. While she was treating the girl, I stayed with her. The child was like a small white flower that bloomed by the roadside. Accompanying her made me, who had gotten used to cruelty and foul odor, feel a trace of happiness that I had not felt in a long time. One day, 2 months after she was discharged, I suddenly received a call from a stranger. It was her voice on the other end. Unable to endure her father's drunken rampage, she ran away from home. I took her in and hid it from the police and her family. I knew that I might have done something wrong, but I couldn't imagine what would have happened to her if I had sent her back. At this point, the man paused. Seeing as there was no change in Chen Ge's expression, he continued. When she was 20, she confessed to me. That year, I was 36 years old. In order to skip the process of dating, we held a wedding just for the two of us. I spent the happiest 5 years with her, but I was also under unimaginable pressure. When I was 41, her parents found her. They insulted and beat her up. They made a scene at school and then at the hospital where I was staying. Life changed so quickly. Gossip is a fearful thing. I could accept it, but she gave up. That day, when I took the last bus home, I called her many times, but no one answered. When I returned home, there was a meal on the table and a long letter that she had written for me. In the end, I found her in the bathroom. Her body was soaked in the water, and she was no longer breathing. The man's face was frighteningly white. His coughing intensified, and Chen Ge reached out to pat him on his back. Thank you. The man did not put on the mask, but the tiredness in his eyes could not be hidden. Actually, every passenger on this bus has their own story. In the day, everyone is busy, hiding their hearts, but at night, these helpless, pained, and despairing people will take this bus to the last station. From the man's words, he did not seem to know that the other passengers were ghosts, or perhaps he already knew, but he had mistaken them for humans. You know other things. Too many. For example, the mute next to her. I've run into him before. There was a trace of sympathy in the man's voice. He has a mental disability, and he cannot speak. He works as a porter at a supermarket. He is often bullied, but he still smiles and praises others. Then why would he get on this bus? A person with a pure heart shouldn't be targeted by those things. Chen Ge was confused. He went to the last station to look for his daughter. The man did not have the heart to continue. Due to some reason, someone found a group of ruffians outside the school to bully his daughter. She burned her palm with cigarettes, and her hair was pulled out. There were even worse things recorded on the surveillance. His daughter never told him, but in the end, she could not take it anymore and ended her life. Quote. School bullying. Chen Ge's eyes darkened. These things had indeed happened, and he had seen them before. Did you call the police? How did the police deal with it? Quote. The man next to him had a mental disability, and his body was uncoordinated. He would trip when he walked, so it was very difficult for someone like him to defend his rights. Call the police. The man's lips cracked into a smile. This father, who was born with a mental defect, couldn't speak, and couldn't even walk properly, knocked out the gangsters and the culprit and locked them up in an abandoned building in eastern Zhejiang. Then, he poured gasoline over them and burned them all. His body is weak, and he has a mental disability. How did he do all this on his own? The police could not figure it out, so even now, they still haven't caught the culprit. The doctor and Chen Ge turned to look at the man at the same time. The man looked rather uneasy, and he smiled dumbly at the two of them. Using violence to control violence will leave more problems in the future. A heart that is already broken from the pain will not be able to withstand the pressure of revenge. He might go from one extreme to another. Chen Ge could not comment on the father's actions. If he was in the father's shoes, he could not guarantee what he would do. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I think that's fair. Not just him, I've seen people with worse conditions on this bus, the doctor said casually. The doctor from the burn unit said casually, there was a time when it was raining heavily. After I got on the bus, I saw a young man in a suit and leather shoes. He was well dressed and looked different from the other passengers, but who would have known that he was a complete lunatic? What has he done? The young man was a wedding host. He had been in the business for a few years, and he had hosted hundreds of weddings. Finally, it was time for his wedding. He dressed in a suit to welcome his bride, but on the way back, he got into a car accident. The bride could not be saved. Even though his life was spared, his face was ruined. The wedding company fired him, and he changed his career to become a funeral designer. When people found him, he would help them design funerals, and when no one was around, he would look after the graveyard. That's quite normal, but in the subsequent conversation, he inadvertently revealed a piece of information. In the dead of night, he would help the dead bodies pull up their yin fate, match them for Minghan, and then host the ceremony himself. The man's words sounded scary. He got on the bus to search for his wife, and then he planned to hold a special wedding. After hearing the stories from the burn doctor, the mentally challenged father, and the funeral designer, Chen Ge realized that this last bus on Route 104 was different from what he had imagined. This bus seemed to have become the path for the living people of Zhejiang to enter the shadows of the city. Many people used it to search for their last hope. Chen Ge did not know how to explain it to the doctor. Everyone treated this bus as their last hope, but they were destined to fail because the final destination of this bus was made up of the deepest despair and pain. Chen Ge even suspected that the culprit in eastern Zhejiang had created this bus to collect despair and other negative emotions. The Society of Strange Tales kept creating ghost stories to collect despair and negative emotions. The ghosts behind the door needed these things. Other than that, only those who were controlled by despair and pain could become the ghosts, vessel. There were ghosts on the last bus. They came to the last stop with their last hope, but what awaited them was another world of endless despair. I can't let something like this happen again. Looks like I'll have to drive this bus away. Perhaps I can create a new route that leads directly to the haunted house. These abnormal living passengers reminded Chen Ge of the game he had played at Fan Kong's house. In that game, there were not only specters and red specters, but there were also many crazed murderers. Chen Ge suspected that those murderers were the living passengers on Route 104. The whole town is filled with ghosts and murderers. The culprit in eastern Zhejiang is much crazier than the Society of Strange Tales.